I must admit this is the most vertical audience I think I've ever spoken to, and this is possibly the first time I've tried one of these, so if I kind of go quiet and then loud, if you're struggling to hear me at the back, will you please just shout out as well. And then when I got here they told me they're going to film me as well, so it's all a bit nerve-wracking. Anyway, good evening everybody, and once again apologies for being slightly late. Just wanted to say, if anybody's got any questions as we go along, I'm very happy for you to sort of, put your hand up, ask anything, or any observations. One of the things that I really like about, well, probably the main thing I like about giving talks, is I usually end up learning something. Somebody will come up at the end and say, oh yeah, we get them in our garden or down the road or something like that. So I always go with a bit more information than I came. So please just do feel free just to kind of to butt in, and if you're going to heckle, if you can kind of keep that at just a couple of minutes, so we want to go along a bit. Right, let's give this a go then. Left hand with a mic, right hand with a mouse. Oh, thank you for that. Because this got an awe when I did it to the Eric conference, and it deserves an awe. This is the cutest mammal in the northeast. This is, as I'm sure you know, the harvest mouse. The harvest mouse is our smallest rodent, and it's really quite surprising how little these are. When you first see them, it really does take you back. They are quite tiny, just 6 grams at the most, which isn't very much at all. The reason they're so small is their ecology, is they're stalk specialists. They're living, at least during the summer, among the tall grass, and they need to be very, very light, not to, for those grass stems just to bend over under their weight. Also, you can see fairly big feet on them, which comes in handy, and the tail is quite special as well. The only mammal we've got in Britain with a prehensile tail, one of the few in the world actually, well, actually, probably all the mammals tonight, it's the tail you need to look for. And when I'm telling people about bats, I always say it's the ears you need to look for. You can usually tell every bat from the ear. Well, with mammals, small mammals, you can tell pretty much most of them from the tail. So I'm still getting the hang of the technology. Was anybody at the ERIC conference? It's just so I'm going to repeat a little bit, so I'll go through it a little bit quicker. But just to give you a bit of a historical perspective on this. So the quote at the top is from Menell and Perkins, who wrote Mammals of the Northeast about 150 years ago, and they said we have but few recorded localities for this species in our district. Now, unfortunately, they didn't say which they were, with one exception, which was at altitude near St John's Chapel, which was really quite unusual. And then for the next century, I could only find another 2 records, both from late Victorian periods, and then absolutely nothing, or it seems to be nothing, until the National Survey in the 1970s, and they only found 4 records. Surprisingly heavy, this microphone. I'm not sure I'm going to get through 45 minutes. And they only found 4 records, so Billingham Beck, Little Newsham, which is just west of Darlington, the Sewage Works at Rowlands Gill, and Causey Arch. And that was the 70s. Then nothing again. Single record in Northumberland, plus Bob Wilkin found them at Causey Arch. which for a long time was the only place where they've been found twice. Yeah. And no further records at all for Durham and Cleveland. So with this in mind, I had an idea to reintroduce them. So back in about 2001, started a project to breed up hundreds of harvest mice, and release them. And this is one of the cages that we released them in, which is an enormous structure for a 6-gram mouse. This is like soft releasing. So if we ever decide to release lynx on Teesside, it's still there, it's still in good condition, so we could put it to better use, I think, really. But it did seem to work, or at least in 3 of the 4 locations where we released them, in a subsequent location in Northumberland, where the Wildlife Trust released them, and a little release that Terry Colt did at Moulton Nature Reserve. Of those, 6, of that 5 have now got harvest mice. We did do some small mammal trapping beforehand and didn't find any. Can't guarantee that there weren't anywhere there, but it seems like it's succeeded. But we needn't have bothered in a way, because that generated a lot of publicity and harvest mice records started coming out of the woodwork. So, for example, I talked to Women's Institute, and a farmer's wife would come up and say, "Oh yeah, we had the nests in the wheat back in the 60s," things like that. And so this is a distribution map from about 2012. So this is Tees Valley down on the right, down here. So from Darlington over to Redcar, quite a few records come to light, but really nothing much at all further north. And on the black spot in Northumberland is a release site. So working with Durham Wildlife Trust, decided in 2014 and 15 to do our own harvest mouse survey. And what that happened there is that turned up quite a few more sort of records. Remember to point the mouse around here in East Durham. So we now found that they're actually up in East Durham as well. More recently still, we're actually in the middle of the National Harvest Mouse survey. I don't know if that escaped you at all, but really one of the aims of what I kind of want to get out of tonight really is hopefully to try and get you to record some small mammals that you will come across, because you will come across some of them, and quite probably nobody's recorded them from where you might have seen them. So we're in the middle of the National Harvest Mouse survey, and that's turned up quite a few records further west in Durham. So somebody called Monique Scott has kind of got the bit between her teeth, and she's turned them up to say the likes of Rayton Meadows, several sites in Gateshead. So they're that'll be over this kind of direction over here. So they're turning up over here as well. So they could well be further afield still. So if you fancy having a go at the National Harvest Mouse survey, it really is just a matter of rummaging around in the grass. There's not a lot more to it than that. It's something you can all do. And it runs to the end of March, and it's really just a matter of whether you find nests or not. And not finding nests is still good. It gives us just a measure of how common they are. How many times do we look and do we find them? Last time, not very many times at all, but this time seems to be found a bit more regularly. And your survey effort is just the amount of time you spend by the number of people you take along with you to have a go. Okay, and there's loads of details on the Mammal Society's website. So just to give you an idea what you're looking for, these are harvest mouse. I'm just going to nests, and I'm just going to flick through a few. So this is in the bottom of a cock's foot, and it's built right into the thick of the thatch, if you like, into the thick of the grass. I'll tell you what. I'm going to do a demonstration. Can you hear me still? If I just start, yeah, I'm going to do a demonstration because this will be easier. This is a harvest mouse nest, okay? So this is what you're looking for. And the thing that harvest mouse nests differ from other nests is they actually build them into the living grass. So they'll take the stems, this is the stems growing up here, and they'll start by weaving them. So when they first start the nests are green. They're very quite well camouflaged. And then they'll weave in more and they'll shred the grass, the blades of grass, shred them, weave them in, maybe stick a little bit of thistle down in the middle. But that had a family of mice in it for about 3 weeks. That maybe had 4, 5, 6 mice in it for 3 weeks. And it's still pretty much intact. So that's a breeding nest. They come even smaller than that. This is a day nest. This is a nest that a harvest mouse made to spend a night or 2 or 3 nights in, and believe it or not, there was a mouse in that at some point. Very, very elegant little things. But the key to them, excuse me, well, one is they're off the ground, so that's a bit of a clue. But also they're just woven into the grass, so you can't just pull them out. You've got to cook them free, basically. So this is one example. That's another one. This is in reed canary grass. If you see any reed canary grass, it's always worth a rummage around it because the nests stand out really well. So if they're going to be around, they're probably going to be in the reed canary grass. Sometimes they're even a little bit more obvious. So this is just a few stems of grass growing through some blackthorn or such like, and they've made that into a nest. Or this through a little bit of willow herb. But these are mostly exceptional. Usually you've got to rummage around, and if you're looking at cockspot and dystocia, things like that, you need to get quite well down into it to find the nests. But when you do find them, it is very rewarding, and they are very unusual. So this could be you. So give it a go. You've got to the end of March. I can see that there might be some shakers out there, I think. Maybe 1 or 2. Okay, so it's got a bit of a whistle-stop tour, basically, through our small mammals. But this is a garden shed mouse. You might know it better as a wood mouse, or its traditional name, the long-tailed field mouse. It is anywhere you can think of mouse, basically. It's probably the most ubiquitous mammal that we've got in the UK. You'll even find their holes in ploughed fields. And these are the athletes of the mouse world. My very first memory of wildlife as a small child, me and my brother had been told to stand in the greenhouse because we'd been noticed on my dad's allotment. So we stood in the greenhouse, and this thing shoots past, well, I remember it as shooting over our shoulder. I'm not sure if it did go that high. But this thing just exploded out of the ground and whoosh. And then a few more seconds, another one. And there were wood mice. And they are fantastically athletic. And if you were to catch one in an alive trap, you don't want to kill it and release it, I think the standard advice is you've got to take it a quarter of a mile away if you don't want it to come back, at least a quarter of a mile. Somebody told me the story where they caught one in the trap, they took it down the end of the street and released it, and they watched as the mouse beat them back to the house. But these are incredibly attractive things. These are the mouse of the Gruffalo and Beatrix Potter and everything. Great big eyes, great big ears, very long tail with fur on the top and scaly beneath. And their tail is a little bit unusual. It's a little bit like a lizard's tail. If you grab the tail, the skin will come off. So don't ever, I'm sure you weren't going to anyway, but don't ever grab a wood mouse by the tail. So this is a youngster, so it's a bit brownish, but they get a lovely reddish brown as you get older. And this is terrible, it's just a black blob on that scale, isn't it? This is a mouse. Honestly, it's a mouse, it's a wood mouse. It's a black one. And somebody did send me a photo of a cream one from Billingham. So they do, in the wild, come in different colours. And this is a sandy-coloured one from the sand dunes at Lindisfarne. And they are quite a sizable beast, aren't they? They're about the size of a hamster, really, if you get an adult one. And they're this lovely two-tone, like reddish on the top and white on the bottom. Can you still hear me okay at the back? Because I'm aware that I'm kind of doing this a bit still, but you'll just have to put up with me. And this is a 2018 distribution map. So if you live somewhere white and you've seen a wood mouse, do send the record in because it'll be a new record. So there's quite a lot of places that don't have them, they're not recorded still. And this is the other mouse that we get. This is a house mouse. And I think somebody set this photograph up. I don't think it really has eaten the entire contents of that loaf of bread. But if it had, this is what tends to happen to them. And I must apologise for showing a dead one, but it does at least show some of the characteristic features. So this is a much greyer mouse. You don't have the contrast, smaller ears, and a scaly tail. And they smell like basmati rice. So if you want to distinguish, if you're not sure what they look like, just sniff them, and that'll tell you. And it really is quite a strong smell. I mean, I haven't come across one for years, but we used to get them on the allotment when I was a lad, and they just stunk the shed out, basically. And strangely, nobody else seems to be seeing them very much at all, because this is the records that we have for house mice. So hardly any house mice at all are recorded in the whole of the northeast. And it may well be that they are actually getting rarer as people get tidier and there's less opportunity for them to get into modern houses and so forth. So they may well be getting rarer, but we really don't know. And this one here, some of you may know it's not a mouse, but I went looking for photographs at work, because I work for a company that does ecology, and so I thought, I'll see if we've got any photographs of small mammals I can throw in. And this was labelled as a wood mouse, which I feel slightly embarrassed about. But I must admit, so this is a brown rat, but it does look like somebody shampooed it. I've never seen a brown rat that look quite that good. But the ears aren't as big. They have a kind of bulkier head, obviously bigger feet, and a long scaly tail, which I should just say, this hasn't been pinned to that. This is how squirrels evolved, I think. So this is a rat kind of climbing up a tree. But you can see the great big scaly tail on the back of it. I probably don't have to tell you an awful lot about rats. I'm sure you've all encountered them. But it looks like you don't have any in Northumberland. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I was going to do a quip about St Cuthbert banishing them, but then I remember that we didn't get brown rats till 1720, and I think he was a bit earlier, even if he hadn't decomposed by 1720. Anyway, one animal that he could have banished was this. This is the black rat, which is a much prettier rat. The black rat we've had since, well, originally it's been found in Roman age deposits. Then it seemed to disappear. Well, it's disappeared from the archaeological record and come back in medieval times. And so it's longer tail, slimmer body, much more arboreal. So in the times when we had both species of rat, the black rats would be in the attic and the brown rats would be in the cellar. And it is now probably extinct in the northeast, quite possibly extinct in the whole of Britain. The last established population on the Sheehan Islands in the Hebrides was wiped out probably in the last decade because of the damage it was doing to seabird populations. And pretty much the brown rat did for this. Now, it might have been just competition rather than predation, but certainly when the brown rat moved into an area, it wasn't very long before the black rat disappeared. And really, there's probably no reason why we shouldn't have black rats apart from the fact that we've got brown rats. And actually, brown rats, although not carnivore, they are a major predator. So it's not mainly the cats that are eating the house mice, it's the brown rats. And water voles as well in urban areas, it's not actually the mink, or it might still be the mink, but rats are a major predator of water voles as well. So brown rats it is. And I'll get another all. This is a dormouse, which is not, I don't think it's quite as cute as a harvest mouse, but it is undoubtedly very cute. I don't know what the current position with these is in the northeast. We used to get them until I think 2006 is the last record up at Allen's Bank over in the west of Northumberland. I don't honestly know if they've still got them over there, but I suspect not. But there are a number of historical records. There is probably still some suitable habitat out there. They're not an easy animal to find, so it's quite possible that we do still have them. But as far as I'm aware, nobody knows. But somebody might be able to correct me on that. So it's always called a dormouse. It isn't actually a mouse. It's like a completely different family. It's effectively a nocturnal squirrel mouse. Is effectively the ecological niche that it occupies, and it is one of, if you class the bats as one group, one of 3 different types of mammal in this country that hibernate: the bats, hedgehogs, and the dormouse. And these are really good at hibernating. They will stay in hibernation for perhaps up to 6 months of the year. So we're going to move from mice on to voles, and this is a bank vole, and just to give you kind of an idea of sort of identifying them. So this is one of a group called the red-backed voles. I'm pointing with my finger rather than the mouse and expecting you to see it here. So we'll try the mouse. Okay, so this is one of the red-backed voles, and it's really quite distinctive. So if you see a picture that somebody's posted on Facebook of an owl with a small mammal in its claws, you can tell if it's a bank vole because the reddishness stands out. Reasonably long tail, at least compared to the other small vole that we've got. And this is an animal, it's called a bank vole, so effectively like hedgeback. So this is an animal of kind of woodland hedges, but it needs cover. So if you've got a woodland that's kind of shaded, you don't have a shrub layer, a ground layer, you're probably not going to get much in the way of bank voles within there. It does need ground cover. But otherwise, it's doing what a wood mouse does, but probably just not quite as well, I should imagine, if you can say that. And this is the other vole that we get. This is one that's been caught in our live trap and just been held up for the photo. It's kind of practicing for when the barn owl catches it, because that's pretty much inevitably what's going to happen to it. So if you analyse barn owl pellets, then probably 4 out of 5 of the animals you get in there are going to be field voles. And it is tempted, well, I'll just do a little bit of ID, okay? So it has very short tail, it's what's called a short-tailed field vole. Small eyes, very greyish. This is probably a better view, actually. And the ears, you don't generally tend to see them very much at all. And so we're saying you can kind of think of it as just barn owl prey, but they have got some interesting characteristics. A small family of them turned up on the Tern Islands at RSP Salthome. Now these are revetment boards which are about 8 inches high and steep in the middle of a lake. So these voles must have just launched themselves into the lake, swam across, then we're thinking they were lemmings or something. But when they got to the other side, they managed to scale the vertical boards, and they were actually living, a small population of them, on this Tern Island. They're probably a little bit more to them than meets the eye, I guess. And this is a very good sign for field voles. So field voles just eat grass and moss, largely speaking. So you'll see there grass nibbled around the burrows, and then the runs where they've been running between. You don't always see the holes. Usually there's a bit of like vegetation over the top of it. But if you see the runs and bits of cut grass in between, that's a pretty decent sign that you've got field vole. And again, a very widespread species. I wasn't going to mention water voles because there's kind of a lot of project work going on in the northeast, and that deserves really a talk of its own right. But then I noticed in the write-up that I said I was going to mention them, so I thought I'd give them a bit of a mention. And I think they're quite distinctive because they've got this lovely chocolate brown colour. There isn't anything quite like this. So I remember from my guinea pig days, if you cross the black guinea pig with a cream coloured guinea pig, this is the colour guinea pig you got. And they're very much like a guinea pig with a bit of a tail on the end, and they swim a lot more as well. But essentially that's kind of what you're looking at, and almost the size as well. These are quite a big animal. These are about 1 pound in weight. But their key sign, probably the only thing I think is definitive for water voles is the droppings, which they will deposit in latrines, and then they'll stamp on them a little bit to get the scent on their feet, and they'll wander around and spread their scent. So these are about so big, quite big really, and a bit like chocolate licorice torpedoes, if you can imagine such a thing. And this is one of their burrows. Very like field vole burrow, but maybe about twice the size, and typically either on the bank side or on the top within about 2 metres of the bank side. Usually a very good sign, but I don't think necessarily always definitive. And water voles really, I think, are most famous for dying out, really. So this is 2002 in Hartlepool. This is a year before I started working there as a council ecologist. and we had water voles in lots and lots of the water courses. By the time I'd finished working there as an ecologist, it all disappeared. So I think I was the least successful ecologist ever. But that's been repeated everywhere. So in the 90s, I would find them in Darlington, where I live, pretty much everywhere. So even in places that you'd think of were unsuitable. So you maybe get a water course 18 inches wide, 2 or 3 inches deep, overshadowed by hawthorn. There's a water vole. So this kind of idea that it's not just the mink, it's the habitats that's changing, of course, a decline. I never really bought that, because to my mind there's a lot of good habitat for water voles still out there. And they used stuff that wasn't classically good water vole habitat back in the day. So I think it really is the mink. So yeah, they have disappeared quite dramatically. Some slightly good news, we have found, I'm pointing with my finger again, aren't I? Sorry. We have found them down here at Greenbella Marsh in the last 2 or 3 years. Just a very, very small isolated population, but they are still in Hartlepool. It's probably because I left. And it's not just the mink that are a problem for them. When you get stoats that can walk on water, then they really don't have much of a chance at all, do they? Okay, so I'm not going to show a picture of a mole. This is all the maps are from 2018. This is a distribution map for the mole. How many people have actually seen a live mole? Oh, it's more than I thought, actually. I've seen one in 63 years. And that it wasn't very it wasn't very well either. But you know, they are pretty much everywhere. There are a couple of places. So I worked in Hartlepool, and again, and this area down here, I searched and searched, never found a molehill once. I suspect it's probably the same as. It's the same for a lot of Tyneside, because they just can't tunnel in, basically. But they are quite resourceful. So just in the last month, I found one in the middle of the biggest park in Darlington, and it must have come hundreds of metres to get to this couple of molehills in the middle of the park, and it's got to have either gone over or gone under quite a lot of concrete and tarmac. So they can disperse quite well. So they're not just confined to tunnelling. So, we're going on to shrews now, which are the other group. And this is the common shrew. And remember I said earlier on that it's the tails that you need to be looking out for. So if you need to sniff your mice, you need to fold your shrew. So this is a common shrew, and for its body size, it has a very short tail. So if you fold that tail over, it's going to come up to its shoulder at the most. And it's a 3-tone shrew, so the back's quite dark, the side's kind of medium, and the bottom's fairly pale. So that's another kind of distinguishing feature for shrews. Now you're probably only going to find one of these dead, so hopefully it will lay still long enough for you to fold it and have a look at the coloration. So these are quite a generalist shrew. They'll be found in most habitats apart from maybe sort of moor and so forth, and they eat a large part of their diet is earthworms, which distinguishes them from the other shrew, which is the pygmy shrew, which is again quite widespread, but this is found more often in moorlands, and it doesn't eat earthworms, so there's a little bit of distinguishment in the sort of habitat niches there. This has got a very impressive tail. So, I mean, for the size of the shrew, that tail there is going to come right the way over the top, and it's quite thick and hairy as well. Very, very rarely encountered, though. And in owl pellets, they're probably not even 1% of the small mammals that you're going to get in owl pellets. Possibly that, but something of that nature, not very many at all. But if you've ever done sort of pitfall traps for invertebrates, you've almost certainly come across a pygmy shrew that's ended up in there. So they are a lot more widespread than you would imagine from other methods. And as I say, most of the shrews you're going to encounter are dead, and this is a water shrew looking like a classic water shrew. So it's that lovely black and white, and usually they have a little bit of a white spot around the ear as well, not always. And much bigger than the other two species of shrew as well. And their tail, they have a fringe of hairs on the bottom of it as well. They are, obviously it's the name's water shrew, they are, very closely associated with water. They'll eat a lot of aquatic invertebrates that they're diving for, and they're the only British mammal that's venomous. And it would be, I'm told, it's quite painful. You get quite a bit of a nasty rash if they do bite you. But they do actually have venom in their saliva, which is quite unusual for a mammal. There's not many that do have that. And now for something completely different. So this is what Facebook turned up. You just never know what you're going to have with Facebook, but it's just something that's worth being patient with. So this is something that Melissa Young posted on just over a year ago. And Jeff found this little chap in the garage. Unfortunately, the little chap did subsequently succumb after she'd taken the photograph. But as you can see, it's quite different to the other shrews that we've got, that we've just been looking at. It looks more, do you remember the clangers? Yeah, the Wammals, I think? Yeah, with those big ears, that long kind of broad nose. Yeah. So it just stood out as looked like a white-toothed shrew, which would be fine, except we're not supposed to get them in this country. So I asked her to put her in the freezer. So when we met up, and that's what it turned out to be, a white-toothed shrew, which is a first for the mainland Britain anyway. This is Jeff, by the way, in case you were wondering who. She doesn't have a partner who goes around pouncing on shrews. It was actually the cat. And this is what it's supposed to look like. So again, very, very different, and still looking a little bit like the clangers, I like to think here. But the very prominent ear is quite different. And just to kind of point out some of the differences in that group. So it belongs to a group called Crossidura. They're like a southern species, and there's about, so far, 180 species of this have been found across the world, which is the largest genus of any mammal. And the one that turned up there's quite a few in Europe, and the one that turned up in Melissa's house, it was right midway between a lesser and a greater white-toothed shrew, so we had to send it away and get the DNA done to find out what it was. But there are quite a few to choose from. And they're different in that they have a lower metabolism than other shrews. So they can be moved around more, so they can stow away aboard some plants and not die of starvation after about 6 hours the way a normal shrew would. And they can also go into a form of torpor as well. So they've got a different metabolism, a different life history. They live at higher densities as well. And they are, I was going to put more sociable, but I don't think any shrew is sociable. They're less unsociable than other shrews. So again, they can live in higher densities, and apparently they even make reasonable pets, so they say. And the shrew it turned out to be was Greater White-toothed Shrew, which is also known as a house shrew, or garage shrew as it now is, so probably not inappropriate that it turned up in the house. And going back to the tails, there's two really definitive features with white-toothed shrews. One is they've got white teeth, and that really does stand out a lot if you look at if their skulls. Because the other shrews all have red tips to the teeth, just a bit like a lemon top ice cream, kind of something melted some wax halfway down it, and it really does stand out. So when you see these with white teeth, it really stands out again. And their tails have got these long wispy hairs on them, which no other shrew has. I don't know if you can see those there. Presumably these are performing some kind of tactile function, because I can't see them really having any other purpose. But that's quite unusual as well. And when Melissa looked back through a Facebook page and photographs, she found that her cat had been bringing shrews in since 2015 at least, and this is one that it deposited in the porridge. I think she ate the porridge before the shrew went in there. Who knows? I didn't ask. And as well as this one, which was at Easington Lane, when we were getting the DNA done on that one, it turned out somebody beat us to it by a month. In August 22, some ecological consultancy 3 miles up the road had got some strange droppings that they're not sure what they were identified, and they turned out to be the same thing as well. A similar thing happened in Ireland probably a couple of decades ago, where the Greater White-toothed Shrew turned up and started spreading, and it has been spreading at 5 kilometres a year, which is a phenomenal rate for a small mammal. Now, if these Haughtney Spring ones have been here, just say somebody introduced them into Melissa's garden in 2015, if they spread at 5 kilometres a year, this is where they could be by now, all the way around there. Now, presumably nobody did introduce them in there, so they could be quite wider spread as well. Does it matter that we've got another shrew? We don't have many mammals. It's easy to get bored with mammals, really, in this country, because we don't have anything like as many as they have on the continent. So another one that just didn't happen to get across the land bridge quick enough when we got cut off on the continent. Is it a major problem? Potentially it is, because in Ireland what's happened is the pygmy shrew, which is this one that you're looking at here, this earless shrew here, has disappeared entirely wherever the white-toothed shrew has become established. So initially they coexist for a short period of time, then once the white-toothed shrew is established, they're not trapping pygmy shrews, not finding them in owl pellets. It seems as if they've disappeared completely. And it does seem as if it's kind of competition. Basically, the white-toothed shrews are just eating up all the invertebrates, which strikes me as really odd. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me that the competition can be so extreme that the pygmy shrew can completely disappear. But I mean, I suppose something similar happened with the black rat and the brown rat, so there is a precedent, and apparently this is what the evidence is showing. So it might matter if it gets established over here. The question is, will we know if it matters? So this is a map of pygmy shrew distribution, and if we look at the political county of Durham, there are only 4 records of pygmy shrew against 2 records of Greater White-toothed Shrew. We only have, pygmy shrew have lived here for the last 8,500 years. We've only got 2 more records of them in County Durham than we have of Greater White-toothed Shrew that have been here for about 5 or 6 years. So again, it's kind of getting back to, we really need to know where our small mammals are to know what impacts are being had. So it's important not just to find out where the white-toothed shrew is, but to find out where everything else is, so that we know if it's having any impact. It might be that some of these places, they just weren't pygmy shrews. That's plausible. So kind of the story so far, back end of last year, the Animal Plant Health Agency got to work, and they set 22 trap lines with about 500 longwood traps to try and catch some of these white-toothed shrews, including in Melissa's garden. They were all negative. Myself and a couple of others have been analysing some owl pellets from, we're now up to 8 locations in County Durham. They're all negative, so it looks as if it isn't widespread at the moment. But of course, as I said earlier on, these things do go into torpor, so it's quite possible they're actually trapping in the back end of the year, and it may well be that these shrews are just not very active at all, so that might change come the spring. What subsequently happened is that somebody sent a photograph into the Mammal Society of what they thought was a common shrew. They just loaded it up on the Mammal Mapper app, and when it was looked at, it looked a little funny for a common shrew, so looking at it again, it was pretty definitely a white-toothed shrew. And so they managed to send me up some owl pellets from close to there, and one of them turned up a white-toothed shrew, so they are definitely down in Nottinghamshire. And then just in the last week or so, this was on, I don't know if you saw, the presence of the white-toothed shrew got mentioned on Winter Watch. It amused me actually, because Chris Packham was saying, if you find one, we want to know. And I was just kind of amused at the idea of Michaela Strachan digging through owl pellets, which I don't think probably is going to happen, but it did trigger off. A record, a potential record. Because somebody said they found one in 1999 in Lancashire. So, and they did seem to know what they're talking about. So, this is strange because they don't seem to be in most of County Durham, but they are in part of it. They're in Nottinghamshire, possibly in Lancashire. So, goodness knows where they could be, where else they might be. So this is kind of where you come in, really, and you know, it would be great, as you've seen, we've not got very many small mammal records of any type. So you know, there is scope for adding to that quite a lot. So, and there are various ways you can do that. So owl pellets is a good one. Yeah, if you've ever tried it, if you haven't tried it, it's great fun. It's not particularly smelly either. You know, it's a little dirty, but it's only owl sick, and basically you pull it apart and you cheese out the mammal skulls in there, and they're quite easy to tell apart, the various species. I put not long in at coastal sites because what could have happened is it could have eaten a shrew in the Netherlands, flown over and sticked it up on this side of the on our coast. So probably best not for that. Live trapping is quite useful as well. It's good for getting a variety of small mammal records, but the problem with white-toothed shrews is they're a non-native. So if you catch one, you've either got to kill it or you've got to keep it. So you know, it's fine if you want a pet shrew or you've got an owl to feed. That's, you know, it's not a problem. Bat detectors is a fairly novel way of looking for small mammals. There's been some research done in the last few years, and most of the small mammals have their unique signature on in ultrasound. So if you look on a spectrogram, you can actually, by the shape of the core on the spectrogram, you can actually work out what species it is. So if any of you do bat detecting and put out you know, full spectrum bat detectors, they will also be recording shrews and other small mammals, and you can now upload that for free to the British Trust for Ornithology's acoustic pipeline, and they will analyse it and tell you what small mammals you've got. So that's kind of an easy way of doing it. You can stick your bat detector out there. Or you can set up a camera trap, and you can submit that to Mammal Web. You just send the video in and somebody will analyse it for you. Or if you find any dead shrews or live shrews or anything like that, just take a picture, upload it to the Mammal Mapper app, and send a copy to the Environmental Records Information Centre, and they'll get those identified for you as well. And just finally, I've whipped through this really, really quickly. I've just noticed I'm exactly on 45 minutes now. That is a rare coincidence, that. But I've whipped through it. So if you want to know some more, back in 2012, the Northumbria Mammal Group produced a book, the Mammals, Amphibians and Reptiles of the Northeast. Now, but sadly, it's out of print. It's published by the Natural History Society. But you can buy it for, I googled this, and you can buy it for £28 at Barter Books at Alnwick, which I did try bartering there once, and they weren't having any of it, so you wouldn't need, it would cost you £28. Alternatively, it is now available just as a download online, so if you go on, hopefully it's a memorable enough name, ravenonthewing.com, and just on the bottom of the homepage, you can download the whole thing for free. So finally, just thanks to these various people who either sent me pictures or owl pellets or other bits and pieces using the talk, and thank you to all of you for listening. Thank you.